It's so nice to see you here. Thank you for coming. I'm Mary Beth Neely, and I'm one of the faithful here at Fort King Presbyterian Church, standing in for our minister, who's away right now. We want to say a few thank yous right off the top. Thank you for everybody who has volunteered to put this together today. Thank you especially to Ben Paramore for the sound, and to Kate Gallagher, who's responsible for the food. So thank you so much. As part of this exhibit, there are 9 artists represented, and you might be wondering what all of this has to do with the ministry at Fort King Presbyterian Church. Well, first and foremost, of course, Creator God expects all of us to be stewards of God's earth. Secondly, one of our most important missions and ministries is all around art. The Art for All ministry was started a few years ago, and it's from that this Hope House came. Furthermore, we are an Earth Care congregation. We have been an Earth Care congregation of the Presbyterian Church USA for quite a few years. Back about 10 or 12 years ago, Ann McKay thought it was a good idea, and that's what started it here at Fort King. And I think that we might be the only church in the Presbyterian Church that has reached the 4th level of being an Earth Care congregation. So the earth is a very important part of our ministry here as well. You know, I mentioned the Hope House. It was Joanne Ullman and the Art for All who had this vision of a house where not only could people meet and use their God-given talent, artistic talents, but where all kinds of groups from the community could come and be with one another for book clubs or counseling or sewing, including, and then of course art as well. And this has come to fruition. So we thank you, Joanne, for all of your efforts in that regard. And of course, the vision for this art, the art exhibits here, as well as this event to highlight the Ocklawaha River restoration, belongs to Margaret Spontak. So I'm going to introduce her, and she will introduce our speaker for tonight.
Thank you for coming. I see Jacksonville, I see Palatka. Any other cities represented? Gainesville, I know. Anybody else?
St. Augustine.
Willaca, my new favorite city, Willaca, Florida. If you haven't been there, you've got, what? Melrose, or Tallahassee. Oh my gosh, I forgot my own brother and sister-in-law. You are probably the furthest to come. And Sadie the dog. Y'all have to all meet Sadie. I'm going to not say a lot about Mark because I'd rather not hog his time, and I don't want to steal anything. But I just want to say, how many know Mark Emery? I know he does. Mark's like a rock star in these parts, if you haven't heard about Mark Emery. Not only has we published his fishing story. But he's got one of those Hollywood stars in downtown Ocala for his movie cinematography work, and he's done some amazing Emmy Award-winning cinematography. So that's lately some of the accolades he's gotten. But tonight I think he's going to talk more about his sportsman fishing, some of that, his diving in Silver Springs, those kinds of connections. And that's very important to this whole story, because we want to unite people, reunite the rivers, reunite people. We want the anglers, I'm a fisherwoman, we want to unite the outdoors people, the conservation community, the business community together, because conservation sees no boundaries. We should all be supportive of this beautiful river system. So I think Mark couldn't be a better speaker to talk about his great history as it relates to the Ocklawaha and Silver Springs. Give us a big Ocala, Tallahassee, Melrose, Jacksonville, Palatka. Welcome.
Thank you, guys. Do I owe any of you any money? My student loan director's not here. That's good news. All right. It is a pleasure to talk to you all, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. Do me a favor, how many of you have ever been on the Ocklawaha River, fished on it? Oh my gosh, I'm preaching to the choir. This is easy. That's wonderful. Well, first of all, we all know that the Ocklawaha River is an absolute landmark. Most of us growing up here fished it and hunted along the shores, and for most of our adult life. So a number of our families and friends would meet on Gore's Landing every Christmas. After Christmas, all the kids have got their newest, latest electronic device, right? Took them all the way. They had to be out there. We take them in the woods, show them how to not get lost. You watch that tree, you walk to that tree. You don't go 5 degrees that way or that way. You don't need a battery for that. You need this right up here. So today we'll go a little bit through all the different things that we do on the Ocklawaha. I don't know if you know the Ocklawaha. I didn't know means muddy. So it's better than that to most of us. You've got these beautiful cypress areas up and down the river, and some of the trees as cypress go can be up to 2,000 years old. Time of Christ. That's how old some of those trees were. Some of them were taken out, of course, by the Cummer Lumber Company years ago, but there's still a few left. The actual way, it was a creek, it was a spin-off of a Creek Indian word called Ocklawaha. So it doesn't sound quite as good as Ocklawaha. I'm going with that. But do me a favor, I want a few of you just to pick out any one of you guys that don't mind volunteering. Can you hold your breath for just a second or two? I'm going to ask you to do that. Just pick out whoever wants to do it. Just do me a favor and hold your breath. If I'm filming or taking photographs, and I'm going to let you stop holding your breath. Now, don't be sneaking it through your nose. All right. If I'm filming or taking photographs or I'm just trying to fit a key into our front door, obviously I need one thing, I need light. But one of the most public examples, well, the other thing is, I think we're going to buy that guy a muffler for Christmas. One of the most public examples I made ever of well, what I was going to talk about briefly was that as long as we need light, we also clearly need physically above all else air. Good a lot nitrogen and oxygen, and it's easy to forget those things when you get excited. But that's a big part of the story here is how these rivers do what they do. And one of the most public examples of all this ever made, it was on ESPN back in the day, and I was an undercard fighter in a kickboxing match. And it wasn't a normal kickboxing match. This was in the Coliseum in Jacksonville. And undercard fighters get brutalized. Everybody yells at them, and they didn't throw fruit back then, but it was pretty ugly, right? And so I took the fight because we never really got a chance to fight other heavyweights, and it was going to be on ESPN. And it was right after the very first Rocky movie came out. It was right after, they didn't have MMA back then, and so this was a huge deal. There were 3,000 to 5,000 people there. I never could count. There was too many of them. So you get up in the ring, and the guy I was supposed to fight, I knew was 240, and I was 197. So how's this going to work out? Well, I'll just run around a little bit, get him tired, and then I'll be able to win. Because I was in good shape for running. So I've been working out hard. I get in the ring, and the guy is 6'6", 240, and he doesn't have an ounce of fat on him. And he's got me in the sight. So the first round, I was terrible. I was so sloppy. I did punches I'd never done before. And this is being recorded on ESPN for all my friends and family, right? And this is right after the Rocky movie, and you see Jackie Chan doing all these crazy moves. It doesn't look like that in real life. And so right at the end of the round, I walked over to my coach in the corner. Was Earl Frazier, was one of the great fighters of all times in Florida. And at 40, he beat everyone in the United States in his division, in sport karate. He was that good. And I said, he's a little bit grumpy out there tonight. He goes, no, he wasn't grumpy. He said, I watched you for the whole round, and I don't think you took a breath. You did not breathe. He said, if you want to win the fight, all you have to do is go out there and breathe, and I think you're going to be just fine. Well, he was absolutely right. I went back out there, and somehow in the third round, that fella fell down. He was an African-American guy, so this was right after the Rocky fights. I'm walking out into the ring after it was over, and I'm looking up a little bit because it was BM before Mary. My girlfriend was up there somewhere, and that was my ride home. And so everybody there had seen the movie, and they're all yelling, Adrian! Adrian! It was the most embarrassing moment of my life. Now, how in the world does this ever have anything to do with the Ocklawaha River? Those of you who are still holding your breath, you can let it go. Hopefully you did anyway. Well, it's really pretty simple. Just want to put this out there in case some of you leave early. What we want to know how important and how dangerous it can be if we don't let things breathe. And what we want to do is by simply opening up the Ocklawaha River, we're going to let it breathe. And when you think about that, it just sounds like some kind of hokey analogy. Really what we're talking about is that these systems actually go this way and that way. That's how our lungs do. They fill up with air, and then they push it back out. In a swamp situation, when we grew up, we'd have every 7-8 years, we might have a drought. So that water would go all the way up into the swamp, and every little thing would go with it. There'd be crayfish. You'd get tiny little gambusia minnows would go up there, and of course other things would follow them. Ibis bass would follow them up. The smaller bass would get up in the shallow waters. And so this flux of back and forth that went on for centuries. The Temucans were here 5,000 years ago, and they were using this whole system. They would gather their food when it went up high in certain places, and when it went back down low, they went back there. That particular function gets lost when you dam a place up. It doesn't work the same. And so one of the things we wanted to do, I actually opened up the wrong file here, so I'm reading off the wrong one here. I'm going to pop the other one open for a sec. Sorry. My wife edited this other one. It's way better. By the way, if you don't know Mary, I'm sorry you're missing all that, but she is fabulous, and it makes it easy to be me. So in following all that up, what you want to do is take a look at what we have here now. We are so lucky in this system. We have so many species of fish in the Ocklawaha as it is, but we also have a lot that are being stopped from using the river. If you look at some of the species are relatively rare. The American eel now, they're talking about putting it on the endangered species list. This crazy critter goes from the Sargasso Sea. It's an actual sea inside the North Atlantic, and it doesn't have a bank. A gyre spins around and forces sargassum grass to stay right in that one little area. Oh, everything comes there. Turtles, it's a huge area. And our eel comes from all the way there, goes all the way up to St. John's, all the way up to Lake George, and it used to go all the way up to Silver Springs. We caught them at the boat basin, which is now Ray Landing. When we were kids, throw a beetle spin out and catch an eel. It was the only thing you caught some days. Everything eats eels. When they're little, bass will eat them. When they get bigger, some of the birds, you can get a great blue heron and he'll work one all the way down. It's a pretty amazing thing to see. And they were so slimy we didn't want to eat them, so we let them go and let everybody else have their fill on American eels. You can look at some of the other things. The Ocklawaha River at that time also had, when we were kids, we would take freshwater shrimp, put two of them on a little hook and get right below the swing dam, right, that swing bridge right there on the Ocklawaha, and catch stripers. And this is a 4 to 6 pound fish for a kid with a little Zebco reel. You know, you're having a big time. This is a major addition to your life all of a sudden. And of course, I don't know if you know, but those little Zebco reels, those reels were made by the Zebulon Bomb Company. In World War II, they made bombs. After that, they made reels that kind of look like a little bomb. If you looked at them, they're kind of a funny looking shape. And so that's the history on the quick history on those. So when we were kids, we just loved to fish. Most of my friends, we all get together and go ponds all over town. We fished in cemeteries and caught bass here in Ocala. We fished everywhere we could, but the big deal was to get on the Ocklawaha. And a friend of mine's granddad would take us as much as he could stand it a couple times a month and take us down there. We'd catch the shiners here in town, go with him, hook a couple of them up through the lips and drop them down right where the Ocklawaha and the Silver River meet. And that was a great spot. And we caught on little chumpy reels 2 to 4 pound bass almost every trip we went. Well, then you're hooked. You're done. As a 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, you're higher than 10 hippies, man. You're happy. So what we would end up, you guys hear me okay in the back row? Because you're not laughing. Okay, yeah, okay. I'm a back row Presbyterian in my church, so I understand. It's okay. And by the way, just so you know, I'm not a scientist or a zoologist I'm a Presbyterian, and I'm not even very good at that. Okay, so just forgive me if I come out of line on something that's not quite scientific. That's just me. So what we would do as little kids is we'd be waiting to go fishing with them. We wanted to learn as much as we could as how to fish for bass. So we'd go into the Liggets or the Rexall drugstore and open up while we were watching the clerk to make sure he didn't catch us. And grubby little hands, and we're reading all the articles, and every single one of those magazines on the front had the absolute surefire way to catch a bass, right? And we'd read every one of those. Little did I know that later on I would be in those magazines and I would write for some of them and all that kind of stuff. At the time, I had no clue that was even possible. So it was a lot of fun at that time to do that. But generally, about halfway through, we would hear the clerk yelling, "Hey, buy it or put it back." Okay. Somewhere around junior college, there was kind of a light that went on at the end of the tunnel. We go like, how can I actually do this and make anything good happen? I'm fishing all the time. I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm actually doing okay for a little kid. By junior college age, my first year, I ran into a brand new guy working there at the college, and he loved to bass fish. And he was the guy that handed out jobs. So when you wanted a job, you go through him, and he would locate somebody in town that could hire you. So I found out about his love for bass fish. I said, well, can you get me a job if I take you out and you catch a big bass? He goes, yeah, we can do that. So I think he could have done it anyway. I didn't know that at the time. I was never a good bargainer. So I took him out to Rodman. And Rodman had just flushed about 2 or 3 years before. When systems get a full body of water like that in an instant lake, it'll take about 3 to 5 years, and you will have remarkable fishing for whatever species you're after in most cases. And in the case of Rodman, you could look way over there and see Roland Martin's boat or Tom Mann's boat, and you knew because their name was on the side of them, painted it real loud like a NASCAR car. But those guys would be out there fishing the same areas that we were fishing. We pulled up, put 4 bobbers, 4 big old corks on, flipped them out, and 3 of the bobbers went boop, and I had my job. One of them was about 8 pounds, and so he was a happy camper. And so he ended up, I was able to get a job at UPS unloading freight at 4:30 a.m. in the morning before school. And so that was a great time there. But those of you who are not fishermen, are there anybody here not fishermen? Oh, I'm so sorry. It's okay. There's people here that'll train you. Don't worry. I'm happy to help. For those of you who are not fishermen, I guess I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's hard for a lot of people who are non-fishermen to understand this passion that we have, the craziness, the lengths we'll go to. I've fished in over 20 countries now. We've been to about 35 filming, and I'm not done yet. We're going to do more, and it's just a passion for many, many people. And so when you first start out like that, people really don't. My parents didn't know. My mom and dad sang under Leonard Bernstein in the New York Symphony Orchestra. They were great vocal people. They sang in the First Methodist Church. Dad was a music director for many years, as some of you know. And Dad would be in the back of the boat trying to figure out how to get the crickets back in the little cricket bucket, and I was catching fish out front. And it just never worked out for us all the time, but we had a couple times where it came together. But for those of you who don't really fish or don't really get the whole thing, there are roughly 40 million fishermen. That's licenses that are sold. There are people that don't fish that don't buy a license. So it's a voting block. It's that big. That's how popular it is. And bass are by far the most popular fish in North America. They're in every single state except Alaska. And now some people are actually putting them in little ponds in Alaska. I don't know why. They're aggressive. They're easy to catch. And they will drive you crazy sometimes. They learn faster than about any other fish. They say carp are smarter, but I don't believe it. Bass, they'll come out with a new lure. Everybody's catching fish on it. You buy some, and then the second or third time you go out there, no, I'm not eating that. We're done here. And they move on. I talked to Homer Circle one time. They put a little device in a bass where they could register where they were going. They pull into a cove with a trolling motor running and the bass would swim out. They never even got to cast. That fish already knew what was getting ready to happen, and he got out of there. So these are not dumb fish. And so to be in an area where they're the largest species or subspecies of bass is the Florida bass. They've taken them to Japan. They've taken them to California, and they get giant, 15, 16, 18, 21, 22 pounds. The recent world record was in Japan. So these were all Florida bass. Mary and I caught them in Africa, in Zimbabwe. They have them up to 14 pounds in Zimbabwe lakes, and also in South Africa. They got them there in a crazy way. They put soccer balls in the water with the bass that they were going to carry over, and that air from the soccer ball was the aerator to keep the bass alive across the ocean in the 1920s. So crazy stuff. But anyway, so after a while, we'd all caught our big ones, and a couple of little group of us that fished together. Everybody got to fish over 10 pounds, and some of us had gotten what we call teeners, something that's 12 or 13 pounds, and a lot of them we got it at Rodman. What we ended up doing is designing flies that looked like lures, and so we started using fly rods to catch these big bass. And myself and a guy named Ken Dauber, who lived out in the Ocklawaha National Forest, fished for him for 2 or 3 years together pretty regularly, and we were able to catch fish over 10 pounds on fly rods. Well, we kind of got noticed for this. We got in different magazines, and Ken and I both got written up in national magazines like Sports and Field and Field and Stream and different things like that. And so if you think about fighting a 10-pound bass in down timber of Rodman or in Cypress on the Ocklawaha River, it was a real challenge to do. And so we'd start guiding people, and they weren't having great luck doing it. So, lucky for me, I ended up getting a job in Alaska about that time. I went to Bill Ray's Sports City in the wintertime, and in the summer I would start working in Alaska guiding up there. And Ken actually did pretty well. He created a lure called a banjo minnow. Anybody hear about that one for a while? It was out for a while, and he sold a bunch of them. It was kind of a gold record. I went to work at Bill Ray's Sports City in the early 80s, and we had speakers on the weekends. These were the best fishermen in the country. They came and talked mostly about bass, and we watched Homer Circle and Glenn Lau and all those guys that were local. Homer had written 49 years for Sports Afield. He was one of the top writers in the whole country. And then you start thinking, well, maybe there is a way I can fish for a living one day. And if you buzz forward to the 90s, Ken had already semi-retired from his fishing lure sales, and I had a couple of films on National Geographic. Both had lots of fish in them. We were doing underwater. And for years I worked with the Klein family out on Lake Weir. I lived right across the lake from them. And Jordan invented underwater cinematography. He made the first underwater cameras that really worked. So I worked with them off and on for probably 15 years, and 8 years real regularly. This was the best person to work for to learn underwater. When he went to Geographic, he knew how. And they don't take a lot of bad stuff when it comes in. Up there, you're shooting all on movie film. And movie film is $400 every 11 minutes. If you short speed it, in other words, you go high speed, you would be running half that. So in 5 minutes, you'd use $400 of it. And so you had to be accurate with your shooting. You had to get everything done right the first time. And that's how it had to be when you worked with the clients. He did Jaws, Splash, Cocoon, The Abyss, Thunderball. He won the Academy Award for inventing underwater cinematography. And he was in Lake Weir, right across the lake beyond Little Lake. That little sandy lake, as John Adams used to tell me. Oh, you were the little sandy lake down. At any rate, so we had a great background to get all this going. But in the spring, just before I left to go to Alaska, a buddy of mine was on the bass circuit. If you've never watched these things, it's crazy. I'm not a tournament bass fisherman. I admire their abilities because they are the Olympic and beyond casters that you can't see in a regular fisherman. A lot of people are really good. These guys are skipping a lure 15, 20 times underneath the dock. And the fish looks up and thinks, something's getting away from me, and we'll run it down and catch it. Well, Shaw calls and he said, hey, TNN, back then it was a Nashville network, they were interested in putting him on as having a bass show. Well, I didn't. Most bass shows are really boring. You're looking at the back of the guy the whole time he's talking about what he just caught. Luckily, Shaw is entirely different than that. He will turn when literally there is no one there, and other than who you're fishing, no TV cameras, in other words, and tell you what he just saw and what he just caught. He's one of the greatest sight fishermen of all times. He would look at a fish's posture in the water and go, that one's going to bite. That one's not going to bite. He would just go down the shoreline, pick the ones that were going to bite, load the boat, and he made $3.4 million catching bass in tournaments. And that's not what he got in Ford, Triton Boats, all the different companies that sponsored him as well. So we made a sizzle reel for him. Those of you who fish saltwater, one of the great places that we all wish we could fish is right where the shuttle launch site is. There's a whole area of water in there. Has not been fished since 1963. Shaw got permission for us to go there. I don't know how we were going to ever compete with the own fishing show that we made for the first sizzle reel to send into TNN, but we tore it up. We caught all kinds of crazy fish. They put us up in a NASA helicopter and flew us over the shuttle. Mary got to go with us. We got to fly through incredible scenery. They actually later, at another time we went back, put us up at the shuttle, and we're looking into where they, and guys, it's not like Star Wars. It's some of it's hand riveted. I mean, it's made from scratch. And me being left-handed redhead, I said, how do you get out of here if we get another fire? You remember there was a fire. And he said, right next to you, we have a clip right here. You hook it on. It's a zip line. And it goes about a quarter mile into a bunker. And it's as fast as we can go. And so we got to see some things and do some things. The redfish there, you know how they taper down in the Gulf? They get kind of skinny towards the back end? Not like that. These look like tuna. They go boom, like that. Huge, huge 45 and 50 pounders. And so we caught them on fly rods. We did the whole shoot, got it, sent it off to TNN. I went back to Alaska. I was working on a film called Seasons of the Salmon for Geographic. And it took 2 years to make a half-hour show. And we had bears underwater slapping the camera. We did all kinds of crazy stuff. Literally, some of it had never been done before. Took a fiber optic lens, went inside a salmon egg, and shot the heart beating inside the egg. I don't know if the Mayo Clinic knew that camera was missing all weekend, but it was. But it worked. And we had a friend on the staff of the shoot who was a diamond cutter. So we employed him to make all the camera moves with that camera because it's 1.9 millimeters. Tiny, tiny, tiny. When cars would drive by at that distance, inside a place in Minneapolis, the egg would shake. So I just wonder now how many vibrations we get from everything we do in everyday life, and why it's so peaceful and wonderful when you're on the river, because all those vibrations aren't happening all the time. All that sounds... So anyway, so Shaw got awarded the show. And he calls me and he goes, I'm in Alaska, it's late August, I'm not quite finished filming what I was going to film. He said, Mark, we got it. I said, well, congratulations, that's great. And I said, no, you've got to come down here and film this. I said, nah, it's fine. I'll put you with some good people, you'll be fine. No, you're coming down here. I said, well, I got to finish this film. Well, I said, when do you have to have it done? He said, well, it's September now. I think by January you have to have 13 and a half hours. What? So he came back and we made a bad decision. We decided we'll put half of them on in freshwater, half in saltwater. So we did 28 locations to get 26 shows between then. And literally at the end of that series, the first shows we put out, we were driving the finished product to the place that was going to air them the week before it was to air. So we got done. We never did that again. We got it all figured out. So over 20 years, I think Seinfeld was on for 13. We got to work with Shaw on this show, and we went to 4 or 5 countries. We went to 39 or 40 states. I don't remember. It was a night drives a lot of times to different places. And so you learn quickly how to compress ideas and set up shot lists so that you could figure out how to make a show from a beginning, a middle, and an end. A really great songwriter in Bellevue, Florida. Tracy Collins and I wrote all the music together, and we scored many other TV shows. We ended up doing 320 television shows. And so finally my mother, for all the piano lessons she forced me to take, got some resolution for all her efforts. She was a saint, and I was not. So when we get back to all this, this is not just a me thing. What I'm really doing is trying to get you an idea of how many places we've gotten to see and how many things we did. And what was great about what we did was we went to really, really good fisheries that were in great shape. And you come back to your own and you start seeing it slipping. And this is the thing that we saw, some of the ones that we'd go to for several years, and we'd come back to a section of Lake Erie or to a section of some other place, and it wasn't fishing like it was before. It can be too much pressure, fish get smart, it can be bad management. Historically, they lit rivers on fire and going into Lake Erie. There was so much pollution. Pollution's down all over the country overall. It's still better than it was in the 50s and 60s and early 70s. But we started seeing that same thing when we go to film at Rodman. So Rodman's not dead. There's still great times when it has a, you know, it contracts like it's doing right now. And they let out a bunch of water, and now those fish are compressed again. They're coming back into the main riverbed. And so people are catching and say, oh yeah, we got some big fish this year. What happens really is that our collective memory is really short. You know, you realize when I was a kid, we'd go to the Sharps Ferry and my dad would pay a guy $3 and we could rent a boat and go up the river. And there was bends in the river. They hadn't straightened it out yet. Now you look at that river and where it runs through the Rodman area, and there's hydrilla, there's hyacinths all over everything, covering up the eelgrass so you can't get to areas where you used to fish. There's springs that are covered completely when it's at high water. And some of you have been back canoeing those. I know Karen is here somewhere. Karen, where are you? Karen runs the greatest tours, take you right up into these springs when the water's low. And they're like little miniature juniper run type springs. They're beautiful. And so those get covered completely when the high water is there with hyacinth. Really, hyacinth is a horrible, quick, fast-growing ornamental plant that has been put into 50 countries from South America. It doesn't belong in any of them, and it really reproduces very, very fast, and it's very troubling because it does a lot of different things. It takes away spawning areas from bass. The water won't heat up, or it won't get light down to certain areas. It creates a false bottom when it melts, and they spray it down and it goes to the bottom. What bass wants to spawn on top of that? He wants to be in sand, clean sand. It's no longer that. It's that much, and then pretty soon it's that much after years. So what you've got in a lot of those areas are the direct results of keeping that dam blocking everything up. We need the river to breathe, right? So the other thing we did, and Margaret got us on it first, we also did another piece for National Geographic called Earth's Moods. If you go onto the streaming site, they have a whole series of shows, and I'm going to pitch one in a minute called America the Beautiful, so leave that one in your mind. But this one's called Earth Moods, and there's all these aerials. And one of the things we did was shot aerials all through the dead forests that are left, where they had many, many thousands and thousands of acres where they flooded cypress. And cypress can be flooded for a while, but you can't leave it underwater. I mean, it's got to have some place to get green growing. And it's half of them are dead. The other half, I don't know if they're going to make it, but it's just miles of the river have been treated that way just because of the dam. And like we said earlier, some of those trees historically went to 2,000, 2,500 years ago. I think many people that are in other counties right around where the dam is are worried about several things. One thing happened after the dam got popular. It got on television shows, and we put it on television shows ourselves, so we were just as guilty as the next guy. And it got popular, so everybody came. So guide services sprang up, a village of bait shops all around the area. People bought property or just built houses near the riverbed, but above the high water mark for the flooding waters. Well, when you drop it down, their property is going to be a long way from the river. And also you've got a lot of other little small things that happen. What we're saying is that the sum of the whole is way more important than the few shortcomings that we have with this. And right now, it looks like, from some of the polling, you've seen that up to 70% of the people think that dam should be out of here. And I think that's good enough. It really is. I think we've got a real shot now at changing how that whole area would look in a short period of time. There's a lot of reasons to make the river back whole again. I think we went through some of those with the fish. The other thing we don't think about is all the wildlife that lives along that river. Once you put it back in its banks, deer, wild turkeys, lots of other species. There's still plenty of alligators there now, but a lot of these other species, if I go down the Silver River in the wintertime, I'm filming for Geographic or people like that right there, because we have wild Osceola turkeys that are coming right along the shoreline. A lot of other species, or bald eagles are coming up in the upper. We've actually had spoonbills on the Silver River now. I've filmed pelicans there. I mean, these are life-changing things for some of these rivers to have this variety in one spot. So what you have, of course, in Florida is subtropics. Some of these things are supposed to be here, and they just haven't been here for a long time. So what we've got to do here is look at this not just because we're going to change one fishery that's already on the wane, but what are we going to do? one of the things you want to do when you get done with this talk is go in and take a look what Margaret's got in there. She has an amazing idea of how, and with these architectural drawings, is that what they were? Yeah, really super setups where you can see how that river could be left in the same channel it's in, that people can stand at the same fishing areas they've been standing at for years. And you know, the upshot of it is that you can actually make it even improved. By taking the dam out, you could have a flooded area here, like a swamp area with boardwalks and all these kinds of things. And we don't think about much as Southerners, but you come down from New York and you walk on a boardwalk at Paynes Prairie and you see alligators all over the place. They tell their friends, they come back down. Literally, you can go to the Everglades. We've made a number of films for Geographic there. And you're going to see people on those boardwalks every day of the year in good numbers, checking everything out, because the birds will come in, all the different species. And a lot of these are species that are completely foreign to somebody from another part of the country. So to me, the greatest reason for me is our responsibility to leave this place better than we found it. Nothing new, but it's that time. And I really, really think, and I think with a lot of support from people like you, it's time to pull the plug on that dam. Get it out of there, get it gone, and start working towards the recovery. Will be fast. We live in, not totally in the Arctic in the summer. We're through a couple, maybe 800 miles from the Arctic Circle. And if you make a mistake in Alaska and you run a four-wheeler across the tundra, that may be there for 25 or 30 years. In Florida, it grew back over about 10 minutes after you left. The leaves pop back up. Everything's done. So that river's going to be fine, and a lot of opportunity for your kids, your grandkids, and their grandkids if we keep it in place. And we do a right job of taking that dam out. The right way to do it is not lunge at it, take your time, put it all together properly, take a couple of years and really do a great job on it. You guys got any questions? Oh, real quick, I mentioned America the Beautiful. For the last probably 2.5, 3 years, we've been working on a project for National Geographic. Geographic got purchased by Disney. I think they own our house now, I'm not sure. They own everything, right? So what they did was they, because of the way things work in Hollywood, they hired the people who used to do Planet Earth to make a film about America. Well, they got stuck in COVID in England. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it's nice enough now that they were allowed to hire all of us that used to work for Geographic making films, and a group of us that we've worked with for years. We call it the A-Team because we're all goofy and have weird skills that are really not marketable anywhere else. I can still wrestle an alligator. So we made the films and sent them back to England, and they would put the music and the edits and writing. Some of the best editors in the world are English. We always say it's because they don't want to go out in the rain. They'll stay 15 hours in an edit suite. God bless them. But at any rate, really great editing and music. And they hired Americans to do most of the shooting, like I was saying. One of the things they did do was get jet pilots that could run 600 to 800 miles an hour with a fancy new camera, and they flew through North America at that speed, through the Grand Canyon, all kinds of places that you've always wanted to go, and they did it in slow motion. So you'll come up to a towering pinnacle, a gigantic cloud system, and you can enjoy it. You're riding around it in that airplane going 600 miles an hour, but it feels like we're going to run into that thing. We're right on it. It looks so close as you're coming in. What we did was they called from England and they said, "Mark, what we'd like you to do is, do you know Diebel?" I said, "Yeah, I know Mark Diebel." "Well, yeah, he's in Africa." "You know what Mark Diebel has done with crocodiles eating the wildebeest?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, I sure did. He did a great job." She said, "Well, we'd like that done with white-tailed deer." "Oh, yeah, well, what else you got?" So I said, "Well, man, they don't migrate. It's a problem." And I said, "We can try to get one, but I have never actually seen it recorded ever. And we'll stick at it, and I'll find some private cattle ranches where that happens." And I knew that there were some. John Rudiani, Rockin' F, and the Drake Ranch let me on there. I spent 56 days in blinds. At 5 days from the end of the shoot, she was calling every morning, "Mark, did you get the shot yet?" "No, ma'am." This is all during COVID, of course, too. At first, they wouldn't let me film. This is Disney Plus has risk management. I'm hanging out in a swamp with alligators, and they're worried about COVID. Okay, whatever. Y'all, I'm on 4,000 acres. There's nobody else here. It's okay. Okay. And so all gets done. Finally, what happened was a doe went to sleep in the middle of the day. I said, oh, I'm going to go eat lunch. I haven't had a lunch in about 3 days. And I didn't do it. I just sat there and watched. And there was an alligator 25, 30 yards offshore just sitting in this little pond. They give you a lens that's $70,000. The lens weighs 28 pounds. The camera is huge. The tripod is monstrous. So it's about a 65-pound outfit. You can't move around and chase anything. So we picked ponds that we could hit every single part of that pond with that one setup. And it would all be backlit in the morning. We'd switch blinds in the afternoon and shoot it backlit in the afternoon. This happened in the middle of the day, the worst light. But the alligator did a Navy SEAL move and got in very, very close. And it took him an hour and a half to cover that 25, 30 yards at the end. And I didn't see a blade of grass move. I knew he was there. I'm watching. And all of a sudden she got nervous. And what she did was, I think she smelled him. She's 20 feet up on shore, not moving. And she was dozing like this. And all of a sudden she got nervous, very nervous. And she started to stand up, and he knew he was found out. So he literally, and I measured it later with a tape measure, 8.5 to 9 foot horizontal jump right at her. There's an odd thing about alligators, and you can use this to your benefit, because when they open their mouth all the way for a brief moment there, they can't see. It's like when you yawn or you blow your nose. So whenever you see that, just wait for that one moment and then make your move. I'm serious. This is important stuff. So that's what happened. She kicked over his head and ducked back down this way. He went all the way through, hit the weed bed behind it, and thought he had her, and gripped it, and oh no. And he backed up, and he was really depressed. He just came back slovenly, like the worst representative of a big bull alligator you can imagine. So he gets out in the middle of the pond, and the year before, an alligator had, I don't know what had happened during the night. I think coyotes had killed a deer, and they had eviscerated it, and it was sitting 30 yards from my blind when I got in the morning at dawn. And I looked at it and knew that had happened because the body was flat. I said, that's not an alligator, didn't do that. So it must have been, we don't know for sure, but it must have been coyote. A gator came up and sniffed it 2 or 3 times. It was like Jurassic Park. It was really weird. And with a big lens, you're seeing him just go all over it. I'm assuming he smelled the coyote. They have great sense of smell. Believe it or not, some very famous people at the University of Florida at the Archie Carr bunch. Archie actually saw one go, I think it was a half a mile from a pond, and found a dead cow that alligators were feeding on. He got in there with and started eating. That's how far we think they can smell. Either that or they're watching the vultures come in, one or the other. We don't know. We can't talk alligator yet. So this gator came up, finally pulled it back in the water, and he shared it with his girlfriend. He was in a pond, and they had 2 or 3 days where they just fed and had a lot of fun. Upshot of this was, that same female was in there this time where he missed. She puts a baby on her head, a little baby alligator, and she's swimming across the pond like this. She's flirting big time. Both claws are up out of the water, and she's just going like this. She gets right to him, and she realized, horrified, that he does not have a deer. So she takes out her paw, and went, doosh, just pushed him underwater and swam off really bad. I don't know if you know but how famous this area is, but we did a talk for folks in Oklahoma. You speak to 7,000 kids in 5 days. The last day you speak to the professors. I don't know 50 Latin names for animals. I'm not a scientist, I told you the truth. I am a Presbyterian and not a very good one. What happened there that night was I had to speak. They had a full-size Tyrannosaurus Rex behind you, a big voice of the theater cabinet system, and you go out and say, good evening, and you go, oh, man, this is great. I'll just say good evening all night. This wonderful microphone system. The great biologist at the University of Florida, he just came out with a great book, and I'm pitching this because you guys need to know about it. It's called Alligators. It's not hard to remember. It is the best book on alligators you've ever read. And so what he did, and a lot of it was on this area, we took the people who were photographing for that book on the Ocklawaha and on the Silver River. So this does relate to this whole story. And his name is Kent Vliet. Kent was a prodigy. At 8 or 10 years old, he could remember 5,000 Latin names for everything. His dad was a professor there, and he had to fix every one of the little bottles with the name on it. Hand typed it all out. Brilliant guy, right? So I get there and I'm speaking, and I'm going to the profs. I'm going, oh, somebody is going to ask me about Crotalus atricodatus or something, some Latin name, and I'm going to be scratching my head, you know. So the first guy asked me a question, and he goes, excuse me, do you know Kent Vliet at the University of Florida? I said, yes, sir, he owes me $20. That was it. They all started laughing. They're carrying on. And I said, what, he owes all you guys $20? Oh my gosh, that guy's, no wonder he's so wealthy. So we had a great time with those guys out there, but going all over filming like we've done, we've actually been able to speak at Geographic in Washington, D.C., and do a lot of other public speaking like that. So we're looking forward, as I get older and creak eater and stuff like that, I'll probably be doing a little bit more of this and hopefully doing a better job than I did tonight. But thank you. You guys have any questions? Have any answers?
Backcountry lawman.
Yeah, really good job. Enjoyed it very much, Mark.
Thank you.
So you were talking about how fast these riverine swamps will rejuvenate. Do you know of another example in the southeastern United States, kind of a similar situation to what we have here, where the dam was breached or taken away? And where would that be, and how long did it take for that riverine swamp to reestablish?
That's such an easy question. I might have Margaret answer that. Actually, I do not know one. There are, a number of swamps in Florida, and of course, St. John's is a great example of how that system works, breathing up and down. It's been a great system for years, and you can start somewhere near Sanford and run all the way up to Jacksonville, and it works. Some years it's all back in the swamp. But no, I don't know that, and that's a great question. I know of some dams. One of the fellows that works in Maine is a great biologist for the Maine Department of Fish and Game, and they took out a dam there, and now they have salmon, and they haven't had salmon there for 75 years. So it does work for a lot of species. It's not going to be an overnight thing. Stripers will need to find their way up. Let's all get together and buy him a muffler. That's crazy.
Casey, did you have anything you want to add? The one I don't know the name of it, but the American shag came back quickly within a matter of couple of years.
That's true.
This is the head of our science team for the Ocklawaha Coalition.
So that's a good speaker, super good mic. So this has been done all over the country, as you know, especially for the salmon issue, out west and up and down the East Coast even, and up in Maine. The only one that's been done in Florida was on the Chipola River, and they took out a dam up there, and the fish instantaneously. They had their fish their species count went from like 30 to 60 within a matter of days, basically, because all those species were ready to go. They wanted to get up there. So that'll happen. It's going to take as long as it takes in cypress tree to grow to restore that forest, right? So.
That particular case, was there a riverine swamp that had been destroyed and then it grew back? And how long did it take to get to 30, 40 feet?
It hadn't been that long yet. They haven't.
Okay, just recently.
Fairly recently, last 10 years.
Okay.
So it's just starting to come back.
But there was a riverine swamp that was destroyed. What does it look like now after 10 years?
I haven't seen it, but I would imagine it's just, slowly reemerging.
What's the name of that?
It's on the Chipola River.
Chipola?
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. One other thing we didn't mention, and Margaret told me something I didn't know, how many manatees are waiting to go up to Ocklawaha and up to those little springs. I thought it'd be a couple hundred. I knew there were some in Lake George, and we fished Lake George a good bit back in the day, and we'd see them there. And also we saw tarpon caught in Lake George, 25, 30 pounds off the mouth of Silver Glen. The other thing about that is that a lot of the parts of Florida have had real trouble with the manatees not having enough eelgrass. Now you've opened up a river that is eelgrass the entire length. So you were talking 600, maybe?
No, I mean, there's upwards over 500.
Over 500.
And so I'm from Marion County, born and bred. We could be the inland manatee viewing capital of the state. Think of that not just being cool ecologically and all that, but look at poor Silver Springs right now and what that would do to our community in a positive way. So, yes, we do. We have some already coming.
One of the other things is you forget that Silver Springs at one time, somewhere around the late 1950s, early 60s, they broke 950,000 people a year going through the springs. And it got over 1 million for many, many years. It was rocking. And a big part of that was seeing that catfish story. The fish underwater were a huge attraction back then. And for many, many years, as I said earlier, drove glass bottom boats in the early 70s and worked at Ross Allen's. And the big complaint you heard over and over again was, where are all the fish? And then people were bringing their friends back from New York or from North Carolina and saying, hey, we used to come here and there'd be big catfish and they'd have a football game between the catfish and the brim and all that stuff. It's gone. It wasn't there anymore. So.
And this lady mentioned, we are getting some manatees up into the springs. There are a little over 120, so that Clearwater Marine, who monitors those unique manatees that are getting up into the Ocklawaha. But they're going through that lock. 2 have been killed in recent months in that lock. It's not a great situation. The lock's not open all the time. So this will be a huge boon to, I think Casey estimated maybe 10% of the population of manatees in
Of the whole
Florida
state.
could be here. Yes.
Yes, sir.
No. Yesterday at the Silver Spring, I counted 16
That's good.
manatees.
That's great.
Yes, that's
Peak
great.
in the winter right
See,
now.
they like it. They want to be more up here.
We were doing one with Apple TV there in this winter, and a number of other folks that we've filmed underwater with them. A couple of things on the ones here that aren't stressed, and there's not a lot of divers, and a lot of hundreds of boats like there are at Crystal River. They play all the time, and we were lucky enough to film them underwater. I've seen them walk up; they'll swim up to another manatee and grab him with a flipper and flip him over and make him spin out, and then just swim away all happy. One of them would wait for our boat every day, and I'd jump in to film him, and he'd swim about 30, 40 feet. Well, they can swim 5 miles an hour. The fastest swimmer on the Olympic circuit could get to 5 miles an hour occasionally for brief moments. I'm not winning that race, right? So I'm going down river with a tank and a 60-pound underwater housing, and he would just lay down and wait for me. I get down there, and you get up. Okay, you're finally here, and then we go down some more. So they're just a great animal, and they're not all stressed out. And so as people we really need to get a little grant money together and put a film together so people don't sit on them and push on them with their kayak paddles, or people with their boats aren't really realizing that big movement in the water is a manatee you're getting ready to run over. There's plenty of room to take care of them too.
Great. Well, I'm sure Mark's going to be around to talk. If you didn't come on the tour, we'll hang around. We're going to hang around. We've been starting the tour here. We don't have to do that, but I'll be glad to lead a group through here. We're also going to be open Fridays from 10 to 4 and Sunday afternoons from 12 to 4. So we had some tours this Sunday. I'll be glad to bring a group. We've got a school group, I think, maybe. Do we? We have a school group coming Friday, so I'm very excited about that. I did want to recognize former Governor Buddy McKay and his wife Ann. And I have to say that Buddy, because Buddy fought tirelessly for this forever. And Buddy, we're getting closer. I just know we're getting closer. Jim Hilty is, what? I thought Jim, he was here. Yeah. Jim was here last week and this week, and we thank him. He's a city councilman who is tracking what we're doing. Any other elected officials, I don't want to mess up there. Anyway, so please come by, stay late. We'll hang around and do some more tours if anybody. And thank you all for coming all the way from Tallahassee.
That's right. One other thing real quick, Mary will be over here. We have some DVDs from the Silver River story that some of you saw at the movie theater here in Marion Theater. And this is the last batch we're going to make of those little DVDs. So if you get a chance, come on by for that too.
Okay, we have one last thing that we need to do that's very important.